Hey folks, Dave here with another quick model making tip from Thunder Mesa Studio. Sometimes the older modeled scenes on our layouts can start to look a little bit worse with age, and this is especially true of modeled water. Over time, dust, grime, and debris can build up on modeled water surfaces until they lose their water-like shine and start to look dull, dingy, and yellow. I recently noticed that happening over here on Big Thunder Creek, which is a scene I completed more than 8 years ago. It's mostly modeled with some Envirotex light epoxy resin, acrylic sheet for the waterfalls, and some Mod Podge for the surface ripples and details. You can have a look at my recent video on Calico Creek for a complete tutorial on how I like to model rushing water and big waterfalls. Looking back at some old photos of how the creek looked when it was originally modeled versus how it looks today, it became clear that some reparative maintenance would be needed to bring the scene back to its original clarity, shine, and realism. The first step, obviously, is to clean the water surface. Waterways tend to occupy the lowest points on our layout, so any debris or loose scenic material tends to end up down there. And to pick that up, I just use a small shop vac. Then a big soft brush is handy for getting any bits of debris the shop vac may have missed. And I'll just sweep these right off the layout's edge. Old dust is a little bit harder to get off. So for that, I use a soft brush dipped in some clean water, lightly scrubbing as I go and periodically wiping the brush with a paper towel so I'm not putting the dust back on there again. You might need to repeat this step a couple of times. Now we'll let that water dry on the surface before doing anything else. Now, if you haven't neglected your scene for 8 years like I have, at this point, after just a basic cleaning, you might be done. Let the water dry on the surface, and if that old clarity and shine hasn't returned, then, well, it might be time for more drastic measures. There are a couple of different products that you could use for this next step, but I actually prefer Woodland Scenic's Realistic Water. And it's kind of ironic because I really don't like it for modeling water on its own per se. In anything other than very, very thin applications, it takes a long time to dry and tends to shrink and creep just a little bit. It's basically a high-gloss liquid polymer that when applied in thin coats will dry crystal clear in just a couple of hours. I like using this stuff because there's no mixing required. In fact, you're not even supposed to shake it or stir it before applying it, and it's ideal for situations like this, getting into those hard-to-reach places with a paintbrush. Now, I can hear some of you out there saying, hey, why not use acrylic gloss medium? It's relatively inexpensive and readily available. Yeah, you could use this, but in my personal experience, it just doesn't dry glossy enough to represent water realistically. That's right, we're going to brush it on like paint, not pour it on as the instructions indicate. Using a couple of small, soft brushes, you get a much higher level of control when working it in around rocks and foliage and other details in the stream bed that we don't necessarily want to look wet and shiny. As I mentioned, you don't need to shake it or stir it, and you don't need to thin it with anything. Just pour a little bit into a disposable cup like so. And then I'm going to start up at the highest point on the watercourse and work my way down. Just applying a very, very thin coat of this Woodland Scenic's Realistic Water to any place that I want to bring that shine back to. And in some places that does include the rocks. Where this waterfall comes down, these rocks along the side here would get a lot of mist, so they would be very wet. So I'm going to get a little bit on there to bring that shine back that I originally had. Using a brush also makes it a lot easier to get into hard to reach places like this back under trestles and bridges and back into the corners and things like that. Again, a light, thin coat is all you need. You want to avoid any kind of puddles or heavy buildup. You don't want to brush this around too much after it's on, because it'll create air bubbles. So you just want to kind of gently apply it like I'm doing here, and don't go back and brush over it again after it's in place. And of course, the thinner coat is going to dry much more quickly than the thick one. And when you're done, make sure to clean your brushes with some warm soapy water. You really don't want this liquid polymer to dry up in those. And now we just let everything dry for an hour or two and see how it looks. Now with the water done, looking around at the other details around the bank and seeing if they need to be refreshed a little bit too, the ground foam or other plant life, and decided these cattails have faded quite a bit under the lights since I first put them in. So I'm just using a little bit of moss green, just kind of dabbing it and dry brushing it on here to bring those back just a little bit. And there it is. Really a vast improvement over how the scene looked just a couple hours ago. The dullness and the dinginess is gone, and the shine and clarity of the water has returned. But let's take a look at some before and after shots so you can judge for yourself. Well, that should hold it for another 8 years or so. But seriously, things like this are a good reminder that as we move forward with scenes on our layout, sometimes it's a good idea to look back at older scenes and see if they might benefit from a little cleanup and maintenance from time to time. And the answer to that question is almost always yes. Thank you for watching this quick tip from Thunder Mesa Studio. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell if you'd like to see more. You can also follow Thunder Mesa Studio over on Instagram at thunder.mesa, or see what's new on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. And if you really like what we're doing here on the channel and would like to show your support, you can do what these folks did and head on over to patreon.com/thundermesa and show your support there. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.